I'm sorry, I'm really amused right now. This is unrelated to the video, just something that's going on at the moment. There was a poll, well, not a poll, there was an article about a poll that referenced the claim that our brilliant president, Donald Trump, made about that wind turbines cause cancer. They don't. And that their poll showed that 99% of people in, I believe it was Iowa, disagreed with him, which is good. So I left a comment on that article as a joke. I said, I'm kind of concerned about that 1% that agrees with him. I said, did they poll like literally everyone, including infants and people in comas? And did they, take no response as an affirmative? It wasn't like a spectacular joke, I don't think. It was just kind of off the cuff. Anyway, one guy thought I was being serious and responded and proceeded to explain to me how polls worked. Like, well, they can't really interview everyone. That would be almost impossible. It was a joke, buddy. I know how polls work. And I mean, I said that. I said, dude, I know how polls work. I was making a joke, and then someone else chimed in, like, I can't believe these people. It was only one person, but someone else responded. I can't believe people are taking you seriously. And that started the whole thing. More of the story, just don't comment on the internet. You're going to have a bad time. Actually, it's not a bad time. It's really funny. The discourse that happens on the internet. Speaking of which, a couple of days ago, I was watching two more reasonably intelligent people were debating Kent Hovind. Why? 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 You don't debate creationists. You try to teach them science while they stick their fingers in their ears and go la 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 la. That's all Kent Hovind does. He is a massive idiot. He's either a massive idiot or a remarkable liar. Probably both. Because it's impossible to imagine for me that anyone could be that stupid. Because he's had this explained to him so many times. He's had so many things explained to him so many times that it's impossible for him not to understand. But, I mean, who knows? He's a creationist, so... But I wanted to address a few points he made during the debate that I feel might not have been sufficiently addressed, and generally haven't been in debates that people have had with him. Not that they didn't do a fantastic job debating him. They did. They kicked his ass. But how could you not? And I don't say this for the benefit of Kent Hovind, because one, I doubt he's ever going to see this. Two, if he does, I mean, he's not going to listen. He's going to sit there like he always does. He thinks looking smug and just kind of makes him appear credible or makes him right. And Kent, that's not how it works. Like, I can tell a person that the earth is round, and they can just stand there and go, no, it's funny that you believe that, but no, it's clearly flat. I mean, that doesn't make them right. And as the two who were debating, Kent pointed out, one thing that, I mean, the only thing you need to point out to him to completely obliterate any chance he's got at appearing credible is something that they made very clear to him during that debate. Being incredulous is not an argument. Saying, oh, that doesn't make sense to me, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm going to begin with this. The theory of evolution is a scientific fact. And if you're getting thrown off by the word theory, then you need to look up what the word theory means in a scientific context. Evolution is a scientific fact. It has been substantiated so thoroughly. It's beyond any legitimate argument. Give me a minute here. Sorry, I had something in my throat. I'm gonna try to edit this stuff out. So if the video jumps a little bit, don't be surprised. If I have to like cough or something, I'll try to cut it. The theory is so well substantiated, and really, the only evidence I feel qualified to present right now would be the fossil record. When we look at the fossil record, we see a clear progression. And what's the word I'm looking for? Incremental changes over time, and a clear progression from simpler organisms to more complex organisms. And that is not an indication of design, that is an indication of evolution. Kent, I know you are sometimes fond of the tool analogies. When a designer has nothing but screwdrivers and he needs a hammer, he invents a hammer. He doesn't make screwdrivers more and more hammer-like until he finally winds up with a hammer, and then make like hammers more and more wrench-like until he winds up with a wrench. He invents a screwdriver and a hammer and a wrench. And that's not what we see in the fossil record. We see incremental changes over time, progressing. It's a it's an unbelievably clear indication of evolution. And to deny that, you have to be willfully ignorant. And there's more evidence. There's evidence in biology, in genetics, well, biology and genetics are kind of relevant, but you get the point. There's observational evidence, and I don't want to get into all of that, one, because I don't have the time, and two, because I don't feel I could sufficiently address it. I am not an evolutionary biologist, and if you want if you want that evidence presented, then I suggest you consult an evolutionary biologist. As a matter of fact, if you're so convinced that the theory of evolution is false, then why are you dicking around on YouTube with a bunch of amateurs? Like, I myself, amateur. I'm not a professional. I don't have a degree. Why are you dicking around on YouTube with a bunch of amateurs? Debate an evolutionary biologist. Talk to people who specialize in that. If you believe you can overturn the theory of evolution, then by all means you should submit your research and have it scrutinized to the same degree that all of the evidence supporting evolution has been scrutinized. This is a solid scientific consensus, and that's not something to be taken lightly. A scientific consensus is the result of decades of research by thousands of experts and so much peer review where it is scrutinized. People go through it looking for mistakes and looking for, inconsistencies and things that don't line up. And that's the reason creation science is rejected. It's not because there's some massive conspiracy to cover up this, like creation's the truth, but we're trying to cover it up because we're all Satanists, or whatever it is you think is going on. The reason creation science is and I have to quote when I say science. It's science, because it isn't, is rejected is because it's full of errors. Evolution has been subjected to every test you can imagine, and then 100 more that you can't. And it probably is about 100 more that you can't, because I don't think you personally, Kent, are capable of imagining what goes on in legitimate science. It has been subjected to every test you can imagine, and 100 more that you can't, and it has passed every one. Nothing in biology makes sense without evolution. So understand, when I say evolution has been substantiated and that there is overwhelming evidence supporting it, this is what I'm talking about, because it's going to become relevant soon. To address your first point, to address I believe this is the underlying basis for your dispute against evolution. Is the correct me if I'm wrong, but you seem to think like evolution is impossible because dogs only give birth to dogs, cats only give birth to cats. The dispute against evolution is basically that dogs only give birth to dogs, cats only give birth to cats, etc. Which is true. Congratulations, you're correct about that. The problem is, the theory of evolution does not claim that a dog ever gave birth to a non-dog, that a dog ever came from a non-dog, that a cat ever came from or gave birth to a non-cat. Evolution doesn't say that. And I know what obviously I think I can predict your response to that as well. Then how do you explain that things got from single-celled organism all the way up to people and dogs and cats, and you think that can't happen unless one species gives birth to another species? And I can understand why you're confused by that. It's sad that you're confused by it, but evolution is more of a spectrum. I think they explained this to you too in that last debate. It's like a gradient. It's very, very gradual changes over a very long period of time. And I know I can already anticipate your response to that too, because you've said it numerous times. You said, "Oh yeah, like hide behind the excuse of time." That's not an excuse. That's how it works. If I were to give you a task that takes 30 days to complete, and ask you why you can't do it in 5 minutes, and then say, "Oh yeah, hide behind the excuse that it takes 30 days." No, it takes 30 days. That's how it works. It's not an excuse. That's just the reality. Evolution takes millions of years. Really, I don't know what else to tell you. If you think that's an excuse, I'm dumbfounded that you think it is. I'm at a loss for how to explain this to you. That's just how it works. But to get back to my point, evolution, species are animals, just life forms in general, are like a gradient. And I think we need to go to an analogy here so you can really understand what I'm talking about. Let's refer to the most common kind of gradient, one of the most easily understood. Think of a color spectrum, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, the rainbow. Think of a color spectrum, and we can point to red and orange and yellow and green and blue and purple. We can point to those colors, and you can see how it transitions from, say, red to orange. But we cannot definitively, and you and I can try to estimate, but we, in all likelihood, will not agree. Like on the path from red to orange, we won't agree at what point it stopped being red and started being orange. And furthermore, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, those are arbitrary reference points that we decided on. There's nothing special about red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. Those are our reference points that we defined. We could just as easily have defined, the reddish orange as a reference point, and yellowish orange and yellowish green, and etc. And then the color orange would be a transition. There's nothing sacred about the reference points we chose. Now we can relate that back to evolution, back to animals. Dog, cat, cow, horse, elephant. These are our reference points based largely on like what's around now, the current state of evolution in various species. But there's nothing sacred about those reference points. Every animal that's alive today is a transition. We talk about, you talk about transitional fossils, and there are plenty. I know that tends to be a point of contention, in this debate, but there's an abundance of transitional fossils, but it's kind of a misnomer to call anything a transitional fossil, because literally every organism is a transitional state between one and another. So it doesn't really make sense to try to define an objective, point when something transitioned from, I don't know off the top of my head what preceded dogs. I know it goes back to like wolves and, I don't know, I think jackals. It's not really important. Whatever it is that preceded what we would typically refer to as a dog, in that broad categorization. None of us can really say definitively, well, this is when it stopped being that and started being a dog. It doesn't make sense. Dog is just our arbitrarily determined reference point. And the same goes for cat and pig and chicken and monkey. They're arbitrarily determined reference points on a spectrum. At no point, you are correct, at no point has a dog ever given birth to a non-dog. In the same sense that at no point on a color spectrum is a reddish color not located directly between two similarly reddish colors. And so this is how the fact that dogs only give birth to dogs and cats only give birth to cats and so forth is entirely consistent with the theory of evolution. That's there's no dispute there. Evolution says that that's exactly what happens. So having covered that point, your next one is harder to address. It requires more of an explanation, which is going to be fun. Many times during the debate, you circled back to the point, well, you think mosquitoes and whales are related, ha ha ha. And your idea is, again, being incredulous, like, that doesn't make sense to me, so it must be wrong. It's very non-intuitive, you're right about that again. It doesn't, on the surface, it doesn't appear to make any sense. The problem is that you seem to think that the theory of evolution, the validity of the theory of evolution, hinges on proving that mosquitoes and whales are related, and you've got it backwards. It's the other way around. We don't know evolution is true because whales and mosquitoes are related. We know whales and mosquitoes are related because of the validity of evolution. Whales and mosquitoes are related is an implication of the theory of evolution. So let's go to another analogy briefly and to try to explain this concept. Let's say yesterday there was a bank robbery, okay? And we look at the security camera footage, and we see the suspect, but we can't identify him. He's wearing a mask. And he's holding up the bank, he's got a gun, and he's wearing a blue hat, okay? And so later we get some information, and we we find out that you're a potential suspect. And we come to your house and we search your house, and we find the money that was stolen, we find the mask that the robber was wearing, we find the gun that was used, all in your possession. Looks like you're going back to jail, Kent. Sorry. But the one thing that we don't find is the blue hat. Now, imagine how stupid you would look if at your trial we present all of this evidence against you. We say we found the money in his house, we found the mask, we found the gun, it's got his fingerprints on it. Literally, we have everything on you. But we didn't find the blue hat. How stupid would you look if after presenting all of that evidence against you, you stood up and say, "You can't prove I robbed that bank because you can't prove I was wearing a blue hat"? You understand that this is analogous to our previous, to the dispute we were just having. The statement, "You were wearing a blue hat yesterday," is an implication of the theory you were the robber, which we've already proven with all of the other evidence. We don't need to prove you were wearing a blue hat to prove that you committed the robbery. However, once we know you committed the robbery, we then know by that implication that you were wearing a blue hat. The robber was wearing a blue hat, you were the robber, therefore you were wearing a blue hat. It is an implication. To tie this back to your point, to tie this back to the dispute here, mosquitoes and whales being related is an implication of the theory of evolution. We don't need to prove mosquitoes and whales are related independent of that theory in order to prove that theory. That theory has already been proven by the fossil record, by, again, consult an evolutionary biologist, or look it up online. I'm sure this information is available. Just Google, like, evidence for evolution. I'm sure maybe I should have done that myself. I'm too lazy. I'm telling you the evidence exists. I gave you one example. There are more. There's plenty of evidence and a lot of research that proves it. But that is what proves evolution. And that is how we know that mosquitoes and whales are related to a common single-celled ancestor. They tell you that, like, in the debate they were telling you, well, they're both eukaryotes, and it was a mistake for them to allow you to turn this question around and pose it this way. Because it's dishonest of you to present the theory of evolution as being, well, a whale and mosquito are both eukaryotes, therefore we know they're related, therefore evolution is true. That's not how it works. That's not how the theory of evolution is validated. And your response to that was fucking stupid as hell too. Because when they told you they're both eukaryotes, you go, well, that doesn't prove they're related. Well, they're both affected by gravity. That doesn't prove they're related, so they have something in common. Kent, let's say for another hypothetical, let's say we were trying to prove that your son was really your son. And I mean, I've seen him, he acts just as stupid as you, so... But let's imagine we've never heard either of you talk. Oh, to live in such a world. and we're trying to prove you're related, and we perform a DNA test, and we come back with the results, and we go, well, according to the DNA test, you guys are related. This is your son. And imagine you say something. You say, oh well. So we have the same DNA. That doesn't prove anything. We're both affected by gravity. That doesn't mean we're related. Do you see how stupid that sounds? Because that's how stupid you sound when you say that. Same thing. The fact that you're both affected by gravity wouldn't prove you're related in the first place, because this really doesn't relate to your biology. But you would be right to say that just the fact that they're both eukaryotes doesn't prove that they're related. But that is not all that we have. We have the well-substantiated theory of evolution, and the theory of evolution states that all modern-day eukaryotes are related. Therefore, since the mosquito and the whale are modern-day eukaryotes, they are related. That's all there is to it. There you have it. I don't know. I think I'm done. So, yeah. Kent Hovind, idiot, liar. Oh shit, I'm sorry, Kent. I forgot about the pencil. You actually made 3 terrible points throughout the course of that entire debate. That was what, like, not counting the Q&A, that was probably about an hour, and you managed to try to make 3 points, and you know, bad points. But I mean, you've got dogs only give birth to dogs. We covered that. You've got I don't get how whales and mosquitoes are related, and I mean, I've covered that. 3, the pencil. I'm sorry, the pencil. And the only reason that didn't pop to mind is because I think the 2 guys you were debating with covered that pretty well. I mean, that thoroughly. And I'm sorry, guys. I don't remember your names, but I mean, trust me, that's a good thing. I only, like, I know Kent because he's a very well-known idiot. He stands out. You guys are just 2 competent individuals who believe in science. You're not walking freak shows, so, you know. Again, though, I'm sorry, I don't remember. It just popped up in my YouTube feed, so again, no offense. I don't really remember who you were, but I mean, they covered that rather well. They referred back to the watch on a beach analogy. But I mean, Ken, let's humor you for a minute. Let me accommodate your own analogy and say instead of finding a watch on the beach, you were to find a pencil in the woods, which makes it even better because, like, then you know it was designed, but there are all these trees around. So, oh my God, how do you know it didn't just grow on a tree? It's made of wood. Yeah, we know. Like, if we found a pencil laying in the woods, one, we know it's designed because we've seen pencils before. If you haven't seen pencils before, you've at least seen something similar to it. You know something's designed if it resembles something that you know is designed. I contend that it would actually be pretty difficult to tell that something was designed intuitively if it didn't at least resemble something that you know to be designed. And aside from that, though, you might determine that the pencil was designed by looking around at the natural processes that are occurring in your environment. And you might say, well, you know, I don't see any natural processes that can account for this pencil. That's the problem, though. There are natural processes that can account for life. And if you look into abiogenesis, am I saying that right? Yeah. Abiogenesis, I'm sorry, I had a moment there. if you look into abiogenesis, it's very credible. We know that amino acids uh, can be produced under conditions similar to those that are believed to be uh, conditions of the primitive Earth. And it doesn't take that much of a, it's not that much of a stretch to think that eventually some of them might come together and form a single-celled, uh, organism or proto-organism, or some sort of, I guess what would it be, like an RNA strand? I'm not, again, I know this stuff fairly well, but I'm not like an expert in the field. Again, you would have to ask someone who has studied abiogenesis. But not only that, but I mean the theory of evolution, again, there are natural processes that we know of that account for the development and adaptation of life. So you have no. It really doesn't make sense to say life was designed and it's just obvious. You can tell it was designed. Granted, life is complex, and even like single-celled life is relatively complex. But that's the thing. It's a development process. You start out with like single-celled life, which might not have the greatest, odds of forming, but given the conditions and given the circumstances, it's not outlandish, and it certainly makes, it's certainly a credible possibility that it would form. And from there, it's just a development and a progression. But there's this. The idea that the theory of evolution, and something you like to say a lot is like, well, we don't know because we've never seen it happen. Despite the fact that we've maybe not seen the magnitude of evolution that you're talking about. We do see variations in species, and I mean, you admit that exists, because you'd have to be even dumber than you already are to not admit that. But at least the theory of evolution is at least based on things that we can see happening. We see organisms giving birth. We see organisms adapting. We understand genetics. We can observe that and observe how genes are passed on from generation to generation. My question to you is, if you're applying this level of scrutiny and this standard of proof to evolution, then let's talk about your alternative. Kent, show me just once, ever, one example of this God of yours making anything. I don't mean a natural process that you ascribe to God. I don't mean that, well, it's here because, apply the same standard that you want to apply to evolution and say we need to actually see it happening, not just see the results and go, well, this is how we think it happened. Show me once, ever, proof. Show me God creating anything. It doesn't even have to be alive. It can be a rock. Show me God making a rock. Anywhere. And if he wants bonus points, ask him to invent a new species. Just out of nowhere. Have it appear before, hundreds of scientists, have it at like a science convention or something, where like a, I don't know, pink flying elephant just pops into the room and goes, "Hi, God made me." Because I will guarantee you that will shut us evolutionists up for good. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Show me once ever of God creating anything, anything at all. Not just something that you claim he created. I mean, show it happening. Because you're really applying a double standard here. I mean, I know you like to say, well, I'm not demanding that you teach my beliefs in science class, but I mean, I've already explained to you evolution is scientific. You can deny it all you want. I really don't care. See, that's the great thing about science. It doesn't care if you don't believe it. This is a consensus of the scientific community. You're more than welcome to challenge that consensus and go through the proper channels to challenge it and present your own alternative. Don't be surprised, though, when experts in the field are there pointing out all the errors you're making. Because I've seen you debate. You're going to make errors. A lot of them. And I usually don't like to go on the offensive about people's religion, about personal beliefs, you know. I'm more than happy to, under normal circumstances, I'm more than happy to, you know, you believe what you want. That's all well and good, as long as you're not attacking my beliefs, and especially as long as you're not attacking legitimate science and insisting that we not teach legitimate science in science class. So let me give you like a brief history of why I find all of this, to the religion in general, to be just, I'm dumbfounded. It's unreal. I can't believe people still believe it. Because a long time ago, human beings were really at a loss to explain anything. I mean, we didn't understand why anything around us was happening. So, you know, you were a primitive human, and you'd wake up one day and there was a thunderstorm, and it scared the shit out of you because you don't know what's going on. You're seeing flashes of light and thunder, and it's scaring the shit out of you. And then the next day, let's say like the volcano behind your village erupts, and it's just spitting fire everywhere, and you have no idea. All you know is like angry mountain spit fire. And then the next day after that, this is a very active week for these people. The next day after that, you have like an earthquake. You know, and you don't understand why any of this is happening. All that you can really surmise here is that apparently nature wants to kill you, and that's scary. And so what people naturally want under those circumstances is they want to understand what's going on, and the reason they want to understand what's going on is they want to have some control over it. But they're at a complete loss to understand it, and even more so at a loss to control any of it. So what they did was they came up with the simplest answer, the simplest, you know, explanation that would reasonably allow them to believe they had some control over what was going on. To believe that they had some control over what was going on. And so what does an answer like that look like? Well, I mean, you could just delude yourself into believing that you could control it, but how long is that going to last? You know, like an earthquake comes along, you go, I can control that. Hey, ground, stop. And it just keeps going. That belief isn't going to last long, so you have to accept that you can't control it. And so the best they can do is they imagine that there were these beings just like them who were controlling all of these things around them. And, you know, these were gods, and that's what God is. It's an imposition of the human ego onto the unknown. And really, in this, when I say gods, it's gods or God, whichever. The two concepts are interchangeable in this context. I hope that's obvious, but at this point, I really don't know what should be obvious. So they came up with these gods who were controlling it on their behalf. But again, occasionally, you know, someone's going to get struck by lightning. So you can't really delude yourself into believing that all of this is being controlled on your behalf, or no one's ever going to get hurt. So they need a way of explaining that, and you need these gods to either be dicks, or they're angry, you failed to appease them, or it's part of the grand plan that you know, lowly little us can't understand. I hope that might sound familiar. And that's how you excuse the fact that, well, these gods don't really appear to be out for our best interests all the time. And you can comfort yourself by believing that, well, ultimately they are. It just, you know, it's just part of this bizarre, you know, grand design that we don't really get. But see, what wound up happening is, like, we found out, we progressed, and we learned that these phenomena around us, earthquakes, tornadoes, volcanoes, you know, all these natural disasters and everything, weren't being caused by God. That they were the result of natural processes. And that there was no God, at least directly, controlling it. So you would think, like, at that point, do we abandon the concept of God? Because it was clearly the incorrect answer. And largely, no, people didn't, obviously. Because that answer raises more questions. You go, well, okay, people went, well, okay, it's nature, but how did nature get there? And so that was the new unknown, and this is the idea of the God of the gaps. God got pushed back onto that idea. Well, how did nature get there? It must have been God. And at that point, like after you realize that the phenomena themselves are not God, the reasonable answer to, well, how did nature get there, is we don't know. Let's wait until we can find out. But again, people don't like that answer. People don't like, we don't know. Let's wait until more information comes forth. So they said, well, how did nature get here, and how did the earth get here? Well, God must have done that. And sadly, Kent, I know this is where our opinions diverge, because you still believe that the earth is 6,000 years old and God created it directly. But let me tell you what the rest of us learned. We learned about star formation, we learned about planet formation, we learned that our entire solar system was actually produced from the remnants of supernovas that exploded billions of years ago. And then naturally the question arises, by the way, the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. The universe is 13 point, I think it's 13.7. billion years old. All the evidence points to that, and all of this, the formation of planets, the formation of stars, is completely consistent with our observations of the universe. There is no, the idea that the Earth is only 6,000 years old is goddamn ridiculous. It, the other, the currently accepted explanations are currently accepted for a very good reason. They are so consistent with all of our observations. They explain everything so perfectly, and nothing in the universe makes sense outside of these accepted explanations. So we found out about planet formation, we found out about star formation, we found out about the universe. We can go all the way back to the inception of the universe at the Big Bang. And naturally, and at this point, honestly, this is why I find it so hard to believe that so many people still follow religion. Because you go, well, we came up with God as an answer for these natural phenomena, and then we found out that that wasn't God. And then we said, well, how did the Earth get here? And we go, well, that must have been God. And then we found out that God was the wrong answer again. And so now you have people who want to insist that there's a God say, well, what caused the Big Bang? How do you explain that? That must have been God. God hasn't been the right answer yet. And it's very unlikely that he's going to be the right answer this time. And I know, Kent, you find it hard to believe that, the Big Bang, you react to that like you react to everything. You go, oh, that's crazy. How did the entire universe fit into a space smaller than a proton? And you're right, that's really, really unintuitive. But you know who else knows it's unintuitive? All the experts who study it and who still believe that that's what happened. And in order to sufficiently understand it, you would have to study quantum physics. And look at me, I'm telling the guy who doesn't even understand evolution to study quantum physics. But it is the best explanation we have for where the universe came from, and I'm sorry that you don't believe that. But, don't blame all of science for your ignorance. And again, people, well, how did that get here? That had to be God. No, it fucking didn't. People have said that about everything that we don't have an answer for. Every time we didn't have an answer for something, people went, well, how do you explain that? It has to be God. It hasn't been God yet. And I very highly doubt it's ever going to be God, because God is the human ego. And if there's one thing we've learned in all the time that we've been around, it's the universe does not revolve around us.